So welcome to people that are joining from the US. I see here US, Saudi Arabia, UK, a couple of European people joining as well. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think we're leveling out there. There are perhaps one or two people that will join us late, but this will be recorded and available to show later. So without further ado, hand you over to Edward.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, so let's get started. Move on to the first slide. So, good place to start probably is just a quick introduction as to who I am, a bit about my background and Robin's. So, I am Edward Harris. I'm one of the managing partners at Hold One Assets. I live in Portugal now, in the Algarve. I moved here about 18 months ago. I moved here from the US. I've lived in the US for 3 years. My wife's American. But 10 years before that, I lived in Hong Kong, so had the opportunity to travel around the world and live in a few different places, and have decided to make Portugal my home from now on. So hopefully I can give some first-hand input into moving here, adapting here, and we certainly had a whole bunch of questions through. I think there was about 50 questions already on the list on the email from people who registered. So I'll do my best to try and work through those with Robin at the end. Yeah, I run. Holborn has a SEC regulated investment advisory firm in the US that I run, but I spend the majority of my time now focused on the citizenship side of our business. So happy to be here and hopefully share some good information with you today. Robin, do you want to do a little bit of yourself?
I was going to say both our photographs look a bit younger than we actually are now, but okay.
I take my glasses off, it's almost the same.
Yeah, so my name is Robin Thornton. I'm a chartered financial planner. Obviously I work with Ed in this team as well. Likewise, I'm regulated in the US with the SEC, and I get involved in all kinds of things really in terms of citizenship, tax planning, cross-border investments. I'm based here in Europe as well. I actually live in southern Spain, not far from Gibraltar. So you know, the kind of things that I get involved in down here are always across borders and involving various either citizenship, residency, or tax, or investments, or all three or four. Previous to that, I've spent time in the Middle East as well. So a bit like Ed, kind of used to, you know, moving countries and homes and understanding some of the complexities that go with it, and you know, the difficulties as well. So that's me.
Okay, so on with the show.
Right, so let me kick off just with today's agenda. We were hoping to run this for about 25 minutes, maybe. Like I said, we've got over 200 people on the call, so it's you know, it's a great attendance. So thank you very much. But this is the agenda for today. We'd just like to run through Prime Minister Antonio Costa and what was announced about the Golden Visa program for Portugal and what wasn't. We're going to discuss and bring some kind of focus to the future for Golden Visas, particularly in Portugal. Quickly run through a summary of the investor routes and options that are available. You know, today's session is not about drilling down on individual investments. We're trying to give you a kind of a flavour of the current situation, and then also the kind of elephant in the room, and it's when will it end? The kind of risk of missing out, and you know, all this noise that's in the media. So we're going to run through that as well, and then finally we've got a Q&A. We've had over 50 questions come in already as part of the registration process, so thank you for that. We'll try cover as many as we can. There's also a questions and answer box, or a questions box, a chat box on your screen. Feel free to put anything in there. We clearly won't be able to get around to every question, but we can certainly reconnect afterwards and answer any of those on an individual basis, and both Edward's details and myself will be at the end as well in terms of contacts, both you know, telephone and email. Okay, So let me just tell you a little bit about Holborn Assets, Holborn Pass, who we are, what we do. Holborn Assets is predominantly a global wealth management company. We manage about $2.5 billion worth of funds, predominantly pensions, lump sums, people saving for kids' education, those kind of things. Family firm. Bob Parker's still our chairman. You know, and we're spread pretty much globally, over 20 international offices. And there's one in the Algarve as well, for example. And we look after about 20,000 clients. So we're not a huge company, but we're certainly not small. So we do pride ourselves on delivering, you know, really good service and really good advice, and, you know, won a chunk of awards almost on an annual basis now at the International Investment Awards. And Holborn Pass fits into that over the years, wealth management has changed. You know, we're all more mobile now, more complex lives, more cross-border things going on. So Holborn Pass really has developed from that necessity and that need. And, you know, the investment side of it is the priority. That's our background. So we're looking to find solutions for clients that is a good investment. It fits their personal criteria. And we're quite big in the Golden Visa markets in Portugal, and we've delivered over 150 this year, which is about, I think it's about 20% of the English-speaking market, as I recall, and that's 10% of the overall. And the reason being for that is the predominance of the Chinese market, particularly in the stats.
I think
so. That's who we are.
Probably being modest when we say we're quite big. So, but there's no definitive stats out there, but we know who our competitors are, and I think we're pretty comfortable that we're the largest provider or company working in the Portugal Golden Visa space. And the advantages that presents is there are developers who want to work exclusively with us, bring projects that just we have access to because we have enough clients to take out an entire development, and therefore negotiate better terms for our clients, which means we get bigger, which means we can help more people, which means we have more access to developers, and so on and so on. So being the largest player here definitely helps us and helps our clients as well. Can I take this one, Robin?
Yeah, why not? You know Mr. Costa probably better than I.
Yeah, not quite personally, but he certainly had the headlines outside of Portugal, which is probably unusual because he doesn't get a lot of airplay otherwise. In November, when at a conference, he made some comments related to the future of the Golden Visa scheme. And this was picked up, news wires all around the world with this is the end of the Portugal Golden Visa or some variations on it. It's worth looking at what he actually said, which was that they were evaluating whether the program makes sense. It has probably fulfilled its function and no justification in maintaining it. No other real comments other than that, other than the fact that he felt like it had done its job and it was probably time to move on from the Golden Visa. And therefore potentially indication is that he would evaluate ending it. So although it was picked up that this was going to be the end, it was a really more general comment that perhaps it was worth looking at changing it or ending it, having it already filled its prime purpose at the beginning. I'll take this one, Robert.
Yeah, well, I mean, just following on from the slide there, the previous slide, that's what you'd expect a good government to do on behalf of its citizens, wouldn't you? To be reviewing policies, procedures, and whatever they've got going on. But let's just put a little bit of that into context, or in terms of the Golden Visa program as well, because it's a big deal in terms of the cash that's raised, and it's probably a little bit of a kind of a darling, really. So it's brought in an incredible amount. So over 6 billion in the last decade. it's a big industry in terms of employment, because it provides effectively free capital, or you know, a good capital flow into, you know, the construction sector to, you know, reform dilapidated buildings. And this is, you know, even the old residential properties that were, or they used to be allowed in the main areas as well. You know, so it's a generator of that. And it's also, you know, nobody has to vote for this. Everybody that takes a golden visa and is implying, you know, you're not getting a vote on who's the best politician that's dealing with it. So, you know, you can be pretty, you know, pretty selfless, I suppose, in some respects. Now, there have been changes, and, you know, there'll probably be more, I'm sure. We'll talk about that a bit later on. But the last major change happened at the beginning of 2022 in January, and it was announced quite far in advance. As I recall, it was kind of a August, maybe even July time, when they decided they were going to strip the residential property elements in certain areas away from, you know, the Golden Visa program. So it was modified. It was kind of targeted. They're basically trying to slow down the housing bubble, which had been created in those areas. And also, to put this into context, and people don't necessarily grasp this from, you know, perhaps what you're reading online, is that this is a competitive space. Pretty much every country in the world is trying to attract inward investment, you know, whether it's Dubai with its recent changes, whether it's the US with its EB5 program. But the competition really for Portugal is Greece. Their scheme used to be at 250,000. It's recently been doubled, and that's again to cool the housing sector. You've got Turkey, you've got Spain here, where I am. You know, really, you know, forward-thinking economy. Although that's not necessarily a citizenship program, it's more residential. And then you've got the Caribbean islands as well. So there's competition out there. So that's, you know, that's to put it into some context.
Okay, so maybe just to run through some of the couple of basic facts about what is the Portugal Golden Visa, and therefore leads us into the conversation then about how might it change in the future. As Robin mentioned, it's been around for about a decade, very successful scheme, good track record, over 10,000 people approved, first citizens, so the earlier investors in 2012 have already done their 5 years and, you know, received their passports. And again, as Robin mentioned, over 6 billion raised, which for a small country like Portugal is a significant source of direct investment. But again, also it's attracting those people. They then move to Portugal at some stage in the future. They're spending more money. They're buying cars. They're, you know, doing other things and spending more money in Portugal. So it's been a big industry and a big employer, and cause for increased employment. So Robin alluded to the changes that happened in January the 1st. I think this is important to mention in context of some of the questions we've seen, which is, well, what happens if it changes again? We have great visibility as to how that works, because just over a year ago, it did change quite significantly. As Robin said, it previously was possible to buy a residential property anywhere in Portugal, and as long as it was over a certain value, that property would allow you to qualify for a golden visa. However, because that was pushing up property prices in the most attractive, frankly speaking, areas of Portugal where most people wanted to live, which is the Algarve, where I do, in the south. So that's the yellow sort of strip at the bottom, and pretty much from Lisbon all the way up through to the north of the country up to Porto. So the main areas where expats and immigrants are looking to move. So the south coast of the Algarve, and what sort of called sometimes called the Sunshine Coast, so the strip of coastline from Lisbon up to Porto in the north of the country. Residential property was removed from qualification. So it doesn't matter if you buy €1 million apartment in Lisbon or a beautiful house in Porto. It's a residential property and no longer qualifies for a golden visa. So that was quite a significant change that happened. But crucially, if you were fortunate enough to have got in and made that purchase before January the 1st of 2022, that's okay. Just because the rules changed afterwards doesn't mean that, oh, now your property no longer qualifies and you don't have access to a golden visa anymore. As long as you invested and you complied with the terms of the rules at the point in time where you made your application, if the rules subsequently change in the future, that's okay, because you get in on the old rules. So we now have this slightly more complicated situation of these various different bans, depending on how old a property is, where it is, whether it's being refurbished or not, how much you have to invest. But the summary would be the entry level properties are at 280,000, and then depending on where it is say, and whether it needs refurbishing or not, up to 500,000 is the amount that you would have to invest in order to qualify for Golden Visa.
And I guess it's worth mentioning you can spend more than that and leverage and take mortgages above 500,000 as long as you are investing that minimum for that zone, so to speak, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's the minimum that you have to put in of your own cash. Again, alluding to a couple of the questions we've had already, people asking, can you take mortgages out? Can you raise debt? This is the amount of money that Portugal and the Portuguese government want to see you bringing into the country and investing in their country. So no, if you found a property at 280,000 euros, and we'll talk about one later, you can't put 100,000 euros of your own money in and then borrow in Portugal the other 180,000. They have to see 280,000 of money coming in and being invested in Portugal in that price category.
Which makes sense, doesn't it? That's
that's the aim of the game.
Yeah.
Okay. So, why do you want a Portugal Golden Visa? Well, it gives you the right to live and work in Portugal. Portugal is a beautiful place. It's some of the sort of stats at the bottom, and again, alludes to some of the questions we got asked. What's the healthcare like? It has a fantastic healthcare system. It has a free public healthcare system. As I mentioned, I moved here from the US, and people talk in the US. That's a big deal. And the healthcare system, as I say, is very good. There is a parallel private healthcare system. So if you want to use just the public system for free, you have that access. You can also, like a lot of countries, there's a private healthcare system. You can take out a private healthcare cover. The cost of the premium for private healthcare is roughly, I'd say, about a fifth that it is in the States. So even the private healthcare system is dramatically cheaper than it would be in places like the US. So a great healthcare system that you can access for free. Free education. Of course, the free education is going to be in Portuguese. So a lot of the Portuguese schools have special classes for people who have Portuguese as a second language. There are also plenty of very good private schools and international schools dotted around to the main areas. So again, in the Algarve, Lisbon, Porto, the places where most people don't want to live. There's great English-speaking education as well. Pension system, social security system. So they have access to all these things. And the Golden Visa allows them to freely travel and stay within the 26 Schengen countries, which is basically the European Union plus one or two others. They're also, we don't get too stuck onto the tax stuff there, it's probably almost needs a call on its own, but there is also a very beneficial tax regime in Portugal called the non-habitual tax, or NHR regime, which basically means, in general terms, you would only pay tax on your Portuguese sourced income. So if you have rental income coming from properties abroad, dividends, interest, as now you get some interest in your bank account, and you're receiving that money, then as long as they're coming from stocks and shares or property outside of Portugal, you're not going to get taxed again in Portugal. And for an area like Europe, which has, generally speaking, relatively high taxes to pay for some of the healthcare and the education and the other things that they have, that is a fantastic scheme and gives you the best of both worlds in many respects.
Yeah.
Robin, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess everybody that's on the call tonight will have done their own research. They looked online and various bits and pieces. To to be perfectly frank, it's not the only way in terms of the real estate option. So we're talking about that there. It's the most popular. I think, was it 95 or 98% or something, people, go that route. There are a couple of other options as well. You can do a donation to the arts. Not particularly popular. I think one was done last year out of about 2,500. So that's when you write a check to an arts charity, and it's all obviously all has to be approved by the government. You can buy into a VC or a private equity fund, and again, that's at a minimum of 500,000 euros. We're not so keen on that, just because of the kind of exit strategy is always a little bit unclear with these kind of closed-end type funds, as we would call them, and they're perhaps a little bit opaque. You can buy or open a bank account and buy a government bond. That's super safe. You're going to get your money back, but you've got to deposit 1.5 million euros for probably the best part of 5 to 6 years. And with inflation running at 7 or 8%, you're guaranteed to lose money. So again, that's not particularly popular. And then there's another route, which is a company creation. Now that is a route that some people have looked at, but again, that comes with its liabilities. So we feel that the lower risk option, is the commercial real estate ventures. Company creation, 10 employees. It's just recently gone up. Actually, I think it was only 5 last year. You have to pay the minimum wage. You have to pay the social security. Even on the averages, you're looking at about 500,000 to 600,000 euros outlay over that period of time. I mean, hopefully the company is successful. If it's not, the program ends, and you may have got 4 or 5 years down the route, but you never got to the stage of getting your citizenship. So, there is a lot of risk there.
Yeah, with the company creation again, and some of the questions we got asked is, can I set up a business in Portugal? When you have your golden visa, you have the right to work in Portugal. Absolutely. I wouldn't necessarily try and tie my visa to the creation of the company, though, because Portugal, God bless it, is an incredibly bureaucratic place, and just opening and running a company, employing the people, a lot of social security taxes and things to do, minimum wages to be paid. It is an endeavor, and if you don't speak Portuguese, not for the faint-hearted. So yes, some people have done it. I think at the last count, sort of 20, 25 people had done this out of 10,000. So it has been done. It's not properly done. But as Ron said, 90+% of people do real estate. The next biggest is venture capital. Again, it used to be 350,000. Now it's 500,000. Less people are going to take that route because you can still do property at 280,000. So why would I allocate twice as much capital that I actually have to? Particularly, as Robin says, these are mainly new funds that have been set up for this purpose. So they don't have a lot of track record behind them. And yeah, being private equity venture capital, there's not a lot of liquidity in terms of how you get your money out at the end. So yeah, no surprise, vast majority of people have gone for the real estate option, and that's therefore where we spend our time. But as of beginning of January 2022, in the prime areas of Portugal, in the Algarve, in the coast around Lisbon and Porto, residential property no longer qualifies. So really, on the real estate option, you have 2 choices. You can buy residential property in the rural interior of Portugal, or the islands of Madeira or the Azores, which some people do. And if you want to live and have that life, then absolutely it's something that you can do and would qualify for a golden visa. But most expats and people from an investment point of view, and again, Robin said at the beginning, we approach this from an investment point of view, you need to be where the people are, you need to be where the businesses are, you need to be where the tourists are. And that means being in those areas where residential no longer applies. So to that end, we focus on those areas where commercial real estate does still qualify for a golden visa, and that's where we have spent the last sort of year and a half, since the rules have changed, developing a range of investment opportunities for our clients, which we think give the best opportunity for rental return and investment return at the end of the period for everyone. And as Rob mentioned, we don't want to turn this into a show showcasing all these various different projects. We have about 9 or 10 different projects on the go at any one time. But I think it's useful just to give you an illustration of the type of projects, therefore, that we're looking at and what they might look at. Should I do this, Robin?
Yeah, fire away.
So this is a project we launched a couple of months ago in the Algarve. This is probably a 20-minute drive from where I live. And because it's in the Algarve and it's a rehabilitation of an existing project, that gets you in at the sort of very lowest possible tier. So of all the routes to get the Golden Visa, this is the minimum level of investment required, which is 280,000 euros. It is in a great location from a tourist point of view. Alvor, there is no map on here now, but Alvor is just next to Portimao, which is one of the main sort of the cities, the second biggest city in the Algarve. Very popular with tourists, beautiful beaches, golf courses. Of course,
some nice restaurants around there, as I remember as well.
Lovely fish restaurants just on the beach. There's some beautiful restaurants down there. So very popular location for tourists. And of course, this is what you want because you're investing in an apartment hotel. And some of the projects that are out there, you end up owning a share, like a joint ownership of a hotel. You might own 1/200th of a hotel. We do have some of those projects, but our preference is always to try and find a situation where our clients end up owning the full title deed. So no different from buying an apartment anywhere else. This just happens to be in a hotel, and it needs to be in a hotel because that's a commercial entity and therefore qualifies for the Golden Visa. But so this is an apartment hotel. You own full title deed to, in this case, 2 studio units. So each investment of 280,000 actually contains 2 studios, 2 studio apartments. The price is
just to put that into context, Ed, I think it's worth kind of explaining that because this is a refurbishment project, it's an existing hotel. It's been trading. It's a standard hotel with, was it 200 keys, as they say, and to package that up as a Golden Visa investment, effectively, it's 2. We're calling them studios, but it's effectively 2 rooms, isn't it? That's put together. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, we try and find projects or focus on projects for our clients that are already built, because there is obviously otherwise development risk. We see lots of projects out there that are off plan. The attraction of Portugal Golden Visa has caused a lot of actors to come into this space and say, oh, we've got a project. And not all of them get built and not all of them get finished. So we're very careful. We have a dedicated team actually based in Cyprus. Our lawyers who do due diligence and all the partners that we have. We only work with the biggest and the best. And again, even them will focus on hotels that are already open and operation, partly because if you're doing a refurbishment, then that gives you a reduction on the amount that the clients have to invest. But secondarily, it de-risks the whole thing for clients as well. So again, this is so you buy 2 units or 2 rooms in the apartment hotel. The developer will cover a lot of the taxes and transaction fees and sales taxes that are involved at the beginning. That's about 20,000 to 30,000 euros worth of cost that the developer will cover for you, again, to try and keep the initial sort of fee burden as low as possible and keep the initial investment amount as low as possible. Then after 4 years, which is really when they're going to finish all of the refurbishments and when they've recouped some of that initial money that they've paid you, then they'll share some of the rent with you as well. But the reality is, for most people, this is an investment that they will make. They'll get some rental return, and at the end of year 6, when in most cases people then have applied for their either permanent residency with Portugal or they've got their Portuguese passport, they probably don't want to keep this investment, and it's theirs to do what they will. It's the full title deed. They can sell it on the open market if they wish. But also this developer will also guarantee that they will buy it back at the original purchase price. So in most cases, 280,000. So there's certainty again from the client's perspective that there is already a buyer out there willing to buy it off them at that point in the future for what they paid for it. So worst case scenario, they get the money back plus some rental return. Plus, importantly, they've had their Portugal Golden Visa and they've potentially got their passport or permanent residency. But if there's upside and the property market continues going up, as it obviously has been recently, then they can still benefit from that and sell it on the open market should they wish.
Yeah, plenty of options there. It's good, isn't it? Gives you
options.
plan
And so
A, B, and C.
Yeah, and this is just one of the projects, but just to give an illustration of what the type of investments can look like. And different clients, some people are looking for higher rental returns, but therefore potentially need to invest a little bit more money. Other people, have sort of more nuances in terms of where they want somewhere where they potentially might come and stay and use themselves. So that's why you can't possibly do that on this type of sort of general presentation.
That's good because it gives you a flavour. It's good to get the flavour, isn't it? I get that. Yeah.
So maybe it's time to come back to where we started, which is now you understand a bit more about the Portugal Golden Visa in terms of some of the features and how it works and what was said and what caused those headlines to be made a few months ago. It is what do we see, what do we hear from the people we talk to, from the lawyers we talk to. See, I'm here as well talking to other people in Portugal. What do we see as the likelihood? So when the Prime Minister made the announcement, one of the reasons why in reality nothing was likely to change immediately and didn't change immediately was in the budget, the governmental budget for this year, 2023, they already had factored in the money that comes in from the Golden Visa program. So if they'd have cancelled the program in November, then there'd be a big hole in their budget for this year. So it was always in reality unlikely that it would end before the end of 2023. So I think that our base case assumption is that we probably have 2023 as headroom. And I would say from decision to go ahead to getting to the stage where we have all the documents that we need from clients, you've purchased your property, you've opened your bank account, we've got your tax number, all that takes 3-4 months to do. When before the rules were changing at the back end of last year, so the back end of 2021, we went through this process of trying to get in before the rules changed. And of course, there's a jam of people all trying to do the same thing. So I definitely wouldn't be trying to leave this till the last minute at the end of 2023. But we think we probably got this year as to go. Then the question is, does the program end at the end of this year, or do they probably make some changes and potentially significant changes to it to appease some of the critics? As Robin mentioned at the beginning, some of the competition in Europe, Greece doubled the value of its investment from 250,000 to 500,000. Turkey did the same, they doubled theirs. So one potential change would be that they look at the tiers that they've created of this 280, 350 and say, well, actually, we'll just make it all 500,000. So one potential change is the amount that you need to invest to qualify for the Portugal Golden Visa increases to a level that then puts it back on the same playing field as its competitors. So,
and if you think about it, with just inflation alone, there's been no real changes in the top line numbers for years. So inflation at 8-10%. I mean, last year they should be putting 28,000 on the lower entry one to start off. They should be rounding that up to, to kind of 300 or 310.
Because some of the critics, when Greece changed their scheme, it was on pressure because it was making entry-level housing unaffordable for the local market. So by raising the investment level and really taking the price point to a different level, that helped internally. So it wouldn't surprise me if I saw that as a change. In terms of critics of the scheme, other European countries don't like the fact that Portugal is unique in that the limited amount of time that you have to spend in Portugal in order to qualify for the Golden Visa. So you only have to spend a total of 5 weeks over the 5-year period, and then you can get a passport. The European passport that allows you to live anywhere or work anywhere in Europe, retire anywhere in Europe, and use the facilities and the social security and the retirement network anywhere in Europe, whereas Portugal's almost captured that money. So for most of the schemes to get on the passport track, Greece, Spain, the European countries, you have to then move to that country and spend, I think Spain is 8 years, Greece is 7 or 8 years. So you have to spend a number of years living there before you start to qualify for a passport. Whereas for Portugal, you only have to spend 5 weeks in total over 5 years. So again, it wouldn't surprise me if they changed that and said, okay, you can still have the Golden Visa scheme, but it no longer allows you to qualify for a Portuguese passport, European Union passport, until you actually move here and spend time living in Portugal. There's other things that they did change the requirements to create jobs from 5 to 10. Maybe they'll tweak that further. Maybe they'll restrict the number of total golden visas being issued. There are certainly other programs in the world that have that. Restricting nationalities and doing quotas, again, that happens. The EB5 visa in the USA has limitations on the percentage of visas can be granted to certain particular nationalities. So there's all sorts of things that they could change around with, and they could just cancel the whole thing altogether. But the good news is that we seem likely to have a little bit of time at the moment where this program is still around in its current form, and therefore a good opportunity for people to get in before it either changes again or ends completely. But I think that the one conclusion I can certainly say with confidence is it's not going to get any better than it is now. The rules are only going to get more restrictive or more expensive. The direction of travel is quite clear. So this is as good as it's going to get now.
Yeah. So this is kind of what you should do, I guess, without stating the obvious. Obviously, you need to talk to us on a more personal nature, and we can run through the investment opportunities, the commercial opportunities, and also whether you qualify for the Portuguese Golden Visa. Not everybody does, and there are complexities, and each family unit, is taken on a bespoke nature. I think the key to this, and Ed and I talk about this quite a lot, but I have lots and lots of people coming to me and asking for help, and it's to get your objective right in your own mind, because again, going to that bespoke nature of whether you're looking for the simplest route, the best return, the investment that gives you the best internal rate of return, the one that's the most tax efficient, the one that perhaps gives you a longer stay in that property free of charge, and even location, even though you don't really, it's not really a driver for it, but to get your objective set in your own mind, and then obviously we can help you and steer you through that. As Edward has said, it's you've got to move quickly. If you're serious about this, you need to get on that train, so to speak, because the first 2 or 3 months of going through the property purchase and getting the title deed, is important, because then that title deed is needed to go to CEF, the application, and that's what we do and the legal team do. Make sure that your sounds a bit crazy and a bit stupid, but make sure your passport's up to date and it's not about to expire in 3 months' time. And if you are married, you've got your marriage certificate, and you've got it, the original with you. And obviously, the most important thing is to talk to us so we can get you started, and the Holborn legal team deal with all the administration throughout. So that's it. I've got Eddie, I've got a couple of questions that come up in the chat box. I know you've got tons to go through. A couple of things here from Hayden. Yes, he's asking, will this webinar be replayed later? we will be sending out and make available the recording of it for sure. Steve, who I guess is in the States.
Shall I
do you want? Yeah, do you want to do that one? Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, if I invest in a multi-unit Airbnb unit, so 14 units, is this still residential or would it be considered commercial like in the US? What's the minimum amount needed? Okay, obviously I don't know the details of this exact unit you're looking at, but in general terms, purchasing a unit and using it for Airbnb is not deemed commercial. That is generally you've bought a residential property that you are then letting out. The scheme in Portugal, I will not try and butcher the Portuguese pronunciation, but it's abbreviated to AL. So that is basically if you are letting out an Airbnb, you need a special license to be able to do that. But the designation of the property that is on the title deed of the local council doesn't change. And it's generally speaking, that's still going to remain a residential property. Just because you are running it as a commercial business for Airbnb doesn't change how that is, in American terms, zoned. So in most cases, an Airbnb unit, it'll be a residential block or a series of blocks. There'll be residential properties. So don't be specific to this individual one, but as a general rule, just doing Airbnb does not constitute commercial. It's still residential, and therefore would not qualify for a golden visa.
Yeah, doesn't it have to have a touristic license as well? That's all part of it, isn't it? Or am I getting a wee bit confused there?
Yeah. So the having a touristic license to be able to rent your property out is this sort of AL process, but say it doesn't fundamentally change the designation or the zoning of that property.
Right. Okay.
So
and I've got another one here from Miriam. If you want to be a snowbird, she's definitely from the US, and not necessarily live there full time in Portugal, do you need the golden visa? Why not just travel on a US passport? And what are the benefits of the golden visa?
Okay. So yeah, absolutely. If you have a inverted commas strong passport, like a US passport, yeah, you can travel into Portugal visa free and stay for 90 days. Not everyone on this call has a passport that would enable them to do that easily. But if you do have a passport like that, then yes, you can. So if you just want to come and travel and spend some holiday time here, you can. But with the US passport, for example, at the end of 90 days, you have to leave not just Portugal, but you have to leave the Schengen area. So all 26 countries. So if you're tripping in for a holiday, fine, yes, just use your American passport, no need to do a golden visa. But if you're planning on having more extended stays here, then you're going to need to find a different solution. Or if you want to spend a couple of months in Portugal and then go and spend a couple of months in Italy, or a month in Italy, then a month in France, you won't be able to do that just with your American passport.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the other kind of benefits are obviously things like education, your family, healthcare systems, etc. aren't they? Because you are a resident of Portugal.
Yeah, absolutely. So. It gives you the rights once you, particularly after you've had it for 5 years and you've got your Portuguese passport, and you want to go and decide, actually, Portugal's beautiful, but I want to go and live in France. You can go and do that. You haven't got to worry about, now I've got to try and get a French golden visa. No, because once you have an EU passport, you can live anywhere in Europe. Maria was just sort of done a follow-up to say, can you invest in real estate without a golden visa? Yeah, absolutely. Anyone can buy property in Portugal as long as you meet the anti-money laundering requirements and so on.
Yeah. Do you want to run through some of those?
Some of the questions we had before.
Yeah. Fire a few at me if you want.
Yeah, so let me end the show so I can see that list. To the top. How is the medical care system? So I think I mentioned that earlier on. Yeah, it has a very good public medical system and a parallel private healthcare system as well if you want to enroll in that. So the system is very good. Success rate or degree and confidence in landing the passport. So success rates in terms of getting a golden visa, that's the first step. We have 100% approval rate. So high degree of success is what we would say there. degree of confidence in actually landing the passport. So just to be clear, you have your Golden Visa. In order then to apply for a passport, you have to have held your visa and continue to meet the terms. So you have to continue to hold your investment for the 5-year period. You have to have spent a total of 5 weeks in Portugal over that 5-year period. Then you can apply for the passport. To apply for the passport, you also have to have done one other thing, which is you have to pass a Portuguese language test for what's called A2 level. A2 is still beginner level. So it's still, let's say, straightforward, but it's, you don't have to be able to be fluent in Portuguese by any stretch of the imagination, but you need to be able to have a basic conversation, ask someone how they're doing, ask directions, those types of things. It's only a 50% pass mark. The idea is just to try and encourage people to make an effort to integrate and to be able to get on in society here. But you do need to do that. You can take lessons. There are test centers all around the world. You don't have to wait until you move to Portugal to do it. There's online courses you can take. So a lot of infrastructure there to help you do that, but you do need to do that. The alternative is you can actually apply to become a permanent resident of Portugal and not get the passport. So there you only have to pass A1 language, which is very basic Portuguese. But there is a requirement. But as long as you have met those requirements, you've made an investment that qualifies, you've done your 5 weeks, and you pass one of those tests, then there is no reason why you wouldn't be getting your passport.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Obviously, criminal record needs to be clean, and not on any sanctions list or a politically exposed person, or
yes, yeah, no,
etc. etc. But yeah.
Okay. Is consideration solely given with an asset purchase in the country? So, as Robin sort of ran through the list at the beginning of the presentation, there are 5 different categories you can do, but at one point in time you are investing and bringing money into the country, whether that's parking money in a bank account, whether that's employing 10 people, investing in a hedge fund, or as most people do, investing in real estate. So there is the idea of the Golden Visa scheme is to attract inward investment into Portugal, and therefore, yes, you have to bring money in for something. Next one was, if I purchase, can I get a loan in the US or Portugal? Again, as we said, you have to yourself bring into Portugal, whether you borrowed that off family and friends, whether you've mortgaged it, or whether it's cash you already had available. Your responsibility is to bring into Portugal the minimum investment level, which is 280,000. Now, to the extent of which you decide you want to invest in a particular project, we have a beautiful project up just north of Lisbon. You can buy 2 studio units for 700,000 euros. The requirement for the Golden Visa is to have invested 500,000 euros. So you can bring in 500 of your own money and get a mortgage to borrow the extra 200,000. But in each classification, you have to have always brought in your own money to match that investment tier within Portugal. Next question down, just conscious of time, so I'll try and whistle through some of these.
I think we should give it another 4 or 5 minutes. So okay. Quickly,
I'll try and do a few. If political winds change and administration changes, can you lose the program or your property? It would be unbelievably unlikely. I mean, Portugal is part of the European Union. There's various different rules and regulations about retrospectively changing programs. It would be a political disaster for Portugal if they did do it. They'd get sued and taken to the European Court for sure. So I'd say A, highly unlikely, and B, as I said, we've seen what's happened when they've changed the program in the past. That's never been the case. There's no reason to think that would suddenly dramatically happen in the future. Yeah. How long is the process? It has got longer recently, clearly because the program has become so popular. And also there were some issues when the Russia-Ukraine war started. Portugal, like a lot of countries, sort of opened its doors to a lot of Ukrainian refugees, so that required a lot of processing time. So it used to take from application to getting your visa granted about 6 to 8 months. It's now more like 12 to 14 months. But the important date is from putting your application in. And the application, as I mentioned, we're talking about probably 3 or 4 months. So that's the lead time you want to lead yourself to get your application in.
It's getting that title deed, isn't it, on whatever investment you've got, and getting that on the with the other documents. And again, that's what the whole legal team and everything is built around, is getting that application into CEF. Yeah.
Benefits of having nationality. Yes, so if you get a Portuguese passport, that's a European Union passport, so you can live, work, retire, use the government facilities, pensions, healthcare systems anywhere in Europe. Can you have nationality remotely? At the moment, yeah, as long as you spend your 5 weeks in total over a 5-year period, you can still qualify for a Portuguese passport. And once your passport, when you're a citizen, you're handing down by descent that to your children as well, so it stays in the family. I'm 50 years old. Can I get a visa? Yeah, there's no age limitation. There are some limitations in terms of children, dependent parents. There are other people that can be included on the application, but again, we're best to go through that sort of case by case with people and explain how that can work. There's also mechanisms for unmarried couples to get in on each other's visas and be attached to a single application as well. Time duration, I think I answered that. How quick, I think I answered that. Best places to buy real estate. As I mentioned, we focus entirely on the areas like you can see on my screen probably, that's Porto, where people, business, commerce, tourists are, and
where the economic activity is, basically.
Takes place. And the interior of Portugal is very pretty, but it's farmland. They're growing olives and almonds and other things there. There's not a lot going on, so I certainly wouldn't be wanting myself to be spending a lot of money buying real estate in an area where there is no demand other than people buying real estate for Golden Visa, because then if the program does end, you're somewhat exposed. Whereas if you're buying in Lisbon, Porto, the Algarve, these were popular areas before Golden Visa, and they'll be popular areas after Golden Visa. The catch is, nowadays, residential property doesn't qualify for Golden Visa, so you have to, look at the commercial properties, the type that we discussed. Inheritance tax rules, and that's a long question, so I don't think unfortunately we've got time for that, but again, we'll be in touch and can follow up with that in person. Do I need to buy a property in Portugal to get the visa? Again, we've covered that. It's 90% of people are buying property. Lowest investment total. So of all the schemes and mechanisms to do it, talking about investments, the lowest one is to buy a refurbished commercial property in the Algarve, like Derby showed, the yellow tulip, at 280,000.
Edward, while I've got you, could you just put on the screen our contact details as well, because I'm quite conscious of time, just to make sure anybody that needs our contact details can scribble them down or take a screenshot or whatever is required. I think it was the last.
Are we not up here on this, on our phone numbers and email addresses?
Yep, that's it. Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't see that before.
It's okay. Maybe it's blended in.
That's because I'm over the age of 50.
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, there are a bunch of other questions. Unfortunately, I think from a time point of view, that's covered. Hopefully, most of them and answered a lot of questions. But yeah, we'd be delighted to follow with people sort of on a more personal level, and we can follow with people afterwards.
Yeah, brilliant. And thank you. That pretty much wraps it up for us. Thank you for attending. Conscious there is over 200 people on the call, so really appreciate your interest. And wherever you are in the world, have a great rest of the day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.